The old man stood in the corner of the dusty dealership yard, his coat torn at the elbows and his shoes wrapped in tape. The workers barely noticed him at first, just another drifter passing through. But when he spoke, his voice carried the kind of quiet confidence that made people turn. "I'll take 5 Mercedes trucks," he said. The yard went silent, then erupted in laughter. The mechanics nudged each other. The salesman smirked, and someone muttered, "Sure, old man, and I'll take a jet." They didn't know that in just a few hours, their laughter would turn to disbelief, and that this ragged stranger would change their lives forever. IT started that morning when the ragged man, whose name was Elias Ward, trudged down the long stretch of highway toward the industrial district. His hands were rough and scarred, his eyes shadowed by years of loss and miles of loneliness. He had once built an empire of his own, a small logistics company that had collapsed after his wife's illness drained everything he had. When she died, he sold the last of his trucks to pay her hospital bills, and when the bank came for his home, he didn't fight. He disappeared into the roads he once owned, a man with nothing but memories and a promise he made to her before she took her last breath. Build again, Elias. Don't let it end here. The dealership was bustling when he arrived. Shiny chrome reflected the sun like mirrors, and salesmen in crisp suits circled like hawks. Elias stood at the gate, dirt on his face, his coat hanging loose, watching a young man in a red tie negotiate the price of a new truck. He waited his turn, patient, quiet, until one of the attendants finally noticed him. "Sir, this area is for customers," the attendant said, a smirk pulling at his lips. Elias nodded, his voice calm. "Then it's the right place for me." He walked up to the counter where the manager, Charles Benton, was closing a deal. "I'm here to buy 5 Mercedes trucks," Elias said evenly. Charles looked up, scanning the old man from head to toe. "5?" he repeated, a chuckle rising from his chest. "Sir, maybe you'd like to look at our used inventory first." The laughter around them was polite at first, then sharper. Elias only smiled faintly. "5. The 2648s, with long-range tanks and GPS. I'll need delivery in 2 days." The men around him broke into full laughter now. One of them even pretended to write up an order sheet. "Cash or card, sir?" another teased. Elias didn't flinch. "Neither," he said. "I'll pay by wire. You'll have your money by noon." Then he turned and walked out, leaving them shaking their heads, still laughing, still certain it was a joke. But by noon, the wire came through. Not just enough for one truck, enough for all 5, in full, with a tip large enough to make the bank call the dealership to confirm it wasn't a mistake. When Charles saw the numbers on the screen, his face drained of color. He called his team together, and they drove out, looking for the ragged man. They found him sitting by the edge of the lot, eating a sandwich he'd pulled from paper bag. When they approached, he looked up with that same calm, patient smile. "Told you I'd take 5, he said quietly. "Now let's talk about delivery." In the following days, the truth started to unfold. Elias wasn't just buying trucks, he was rebuilding. He had partnered silently with an old friend overseas who'd opened a contract for transport across 3 countries. They needed a fleet and a man who knew the roads better than anyone. Elias was that man. His name had faded, but his reputation hadn't. And when word spread that the ragged man who bought 5 Mercedes trucks in cash was once the founder of Ward Freight, the company that helped rebuild the coastal trade routes after the floods years ago, people began to remember one of the young salesmen, the same who had mocked him first, approached Elias days later. "Sir, I'm sorry," he said, his voice soft, almost ashamed. Elias simply nodded. "Never judge the road a man's walked by the dust on his shoes," he replied. "Sometimes the dust means he's come farther than you can imagine." Weeks passed, and the trucks rolled out under Elias's new company name, Phoenix Freight. He hired drivers who had been laid off, men who'd lost their homes, veterans trying to start over. He trained them himself, teaching them discipline, patience, and pride in honest work. Slowly, the ragged man became a legend. People who had laughed began to seek him out for advice, for opportunity, for hope. But there was one moment, months later, that defined it all. During a media interview, when asked why he chose to buy from the same dealership that had mocked him, Elias simply smiled. Because laughter is just noise, he said. But actions echo. I wanted them to hear the echo of their mistake and learn from it. And they did. The dealership began sponsoring training for underprivileged mechanics, inspired by Elias's story. The same men who had laughed now built futures for others. The same young salesman who'd sneered now led the community outreach team, telling everyone about the day the ragged man taught him what real worth looks like. Elias never bragged, never gloated. He worked quietly, humbly, with the same hands that once turned rusty wrenches and now signed contracts worth millions. His company grew, and every truck bore a small plate under the mirror with 5 words engraved. The road remembers the kind. When he finally retired, he left a note for his workers that said, "Don't wait for people to believe in you. Let your work make them remember they should have." The man who walked into a dealership and was laughed out of the room became a symbol of resilience and redemption. He proved that worth isn't worn on your clothes. It's built in your heart, mile by mile. And so, when you hear someone laugh at your dreams, remember Elias Ward, the ragged man who said he'd take 5 Mercedes trucks. They laughed, but that laughter became their biggest mistake and his greatest beginning.